The Online Narcissist, using Ed Sheeran. That may not have been a title that you expected to see today, as I, H.G. Tudor, continue to educate you about narcissism. What is this? Is this some kind of tag team approach from a narcissist triangulating a victim with the ginger-haired singer-songwriter? What has Edward Christopher Sheeran, MBE, done to deserve being roped in by a narcissist? The young man who began writing songs aged 11 and has had a string of hits and has become a rather wealthy individual has found himself involved in a narcissistic ensnarement. In what way? Well, I shall tell you. As reported in the Telegraph, online husband used Ed Sheeran songs to con me out of £310,000. Yes, an individual exhibiting no emotional empathy, operating with a sense of entitlement, failing to show accountability for their behaviour, duped a lady in a romance scam, taking a considerable sum of money from her. The lady's tale is thus. Like many, my life hasn't been an easy one. In 2002, when I was 48, my husband died of bowel cancer, leaving my two sons, then 17 and 20, with no father. My eldest son was preparing to leave university and tried to deal with his grief by going travelling. However, my younger son was turning 18 and about to set off for university. He'd been extremely close to his father. He went to university, but after graduating, he had a mental breakdown and ended up in a psychiatric unit. Thus, we already have the picture of a grieving woman who'd lost her husband and dealing with two young men, one of whom was suffering from mental health difficulties. She continues by explaining, in 2010, I retired from my teaching job and began supporting my elderly parents. My father was suffering from dementia, and my mother had poor mobility. With support, I was able to keep them in their own bungalow until they both passed away in 2017, within 3 months of each other. It was a harrowing time. Along with that, I also lost my sister on the operating table when she suffered a pulmonary embolism at the age of 54. Thus, this lady is facing difficulty and tragedy at this point in her life. After my husband died, I was on my own for 9 years. But in 2011, I finally found happiness with someone else. However, after 3 short years together, tragedy struck again, and he was diagnosed with prostate cancer. It was heartbreaking to see history repeating itself. By 2018, his health was really deteriorating. By 2019, he was on chemo tablets, and by 2020, he had 2 nephrostomy bags as his kidneys were failing. The pandemic had started, and I regularly changed these to avoid nurses coming and going from the house. By 2021, he was on full chemo, and the cancer had spread to his bowel. He passed away in January 2022. I kept him at home until the last 5 days of his death. For the whole of 2022, I was mourning his death. God, how I missed him. I was so bereft. As time went on, I felt that life could not get any worse, but it has. In March this year, my daughter-in-law asked me how I was feeling. I remember saying I was feeling lonely, but I didn't feel alone. The truth was, I felt utterly awful. I needed help. I wanted to be loved. I wanted someone to put their arms around me and say everything was going to be okay. She suggested I join an online dating site, so I did. Regular viewers of my work will be familiar with my views about online dating sites. It's very simple. Don't use them. Not only are they set up just to make money out of you, and you're more likely to be disappointed by the outcome, they are absolute hunting grounds for my kind. In March, this lady joined a site called Our Time, which is for over 50s, and I met someone. We emailed for a month, but we didn't meet up. He suggested we chat on WhatsApp, which we did regularly. Note the monopolization of time, repeated hoovering, but we never FaceTimed. I was made to feel absolutely wonderful. A common experience of someone when they first meet a narcissist, of course. For the first time in so long, I felt loved and desired. But looking back, I was incredibly naive and desperate. But he was manipulative, controlling, and subtly threatening. I loved him. Suddenly, out of the blue, he told me he was going to Dubai on business, but he would be back in July. He was securing broadcasting and video equipment, he said. However, every time he was going to return to the UK, something got in the way. He said his contract could only be completed if he could secure the funds to have the equipment shipped, and this was where I offered my help. It started with a loan of £11,500, residual benefit, and in the end I gave him a total of £310,000. It was only after a friend snapped me back into reality that I realised it was all one big con. I'm ashamed and embarrassed. I loathe myself. I have handed the money I inherited from my parents, which was supposed to be for future generations, to a criminal. Of course, what has clearly happened here is that this individual is the victim of what is commonly called a romance scam that has been implemented by an individual who undoubtedly would be a narcissist, that has roped her in through love bombing, that has made her feel so special, and of course was able to capitalize upon her evident vulnerabilities. She had lost 2 people that she loved to illness. She was dealing with 2 children who were now young men. She'd lost both her parents. She'd lost her sister. And therefore, as a consequence of these repeated tragedies and the strain that it had impacted upon her, this made her especially vulnerable and ripe for exploitation. Along comes a spider. Enter the narcissist, recognizing the vulnerability that she exhibits, and therefore love bombs her, makes her feel special, builds her up, and, as part of doing so, then seeks to utilize her for the residual benefit of money. A story's concocted about going to Dubai on business, undoubtedly a lie, and that he was securing broadcasting and video equipment, invariably a lie. The individual had no desire to meet her, didn't FaceTime her, but wanted to get money out of her, and through love bombing her, cynically exploited her vulnerabilities in order to get to that residual benefit. By taking this money, they demonstrated they had no emotional empathy for her. They demonstrated no accountability for their behaviours. They utilised manipulations to control her into a position of giving up that money. The lady concerned explains that she reported the fraud to her bank, HSBC, but she felt it let her down so badly by failing to protect her from the scam, and that she would hold zero hope of ever seeing a penny of her money again. She also explains that she felt so hopeless that the doctor has prescribed her antidepressants. Now, this correspondence has actually been sent in to the Consumer Champion at the Telegraph with regard to their money section. So whilst it's about her loss of money to a romance scam and as a consequence of being entangled with an online narcissist, the fact is that her complaint revolves around the fact that she is being diddled out of a large sum of money. It can be seen, of course, that this individual utilised the usual manipulations, the love bombing, making her feel flattered, praising her, and, of course, the utilisation of music, something that we'll come to in a moment. The Consumer Champion, Katie Morley, replies, and I'm going to read you the reply because it actually tells us more about what had gone on. She explains to the reader, "You say you're usually very sensible with money, which has left you in shock over your own behaviour when you handed over £310,000 to someone you had never met. The reality was that in your highly vulnerable and lonely state, which of course the narcissist would exploit, this professional con artist worked on you so expertly that you felt like you were living in a fantasy universe he had created for you both. In effect, a folie à deux. A common experience of where the narcissist creates a cult of one. You sent me reams of WhatsApp messages and emails between the two of you. Note the expansive and incessant messaging that takes place between narcissist and victim, a common thread, the monopolization of time, the repeated hoovering, the sense of entitlement and lack of boundary recognition in sending those messages. The messages made for heartbreaking reading. He claimed to be a widower too, pity play, mirroring, who was unable to have children, pity play, and you poured your hearts out to each other. He told you music had got him through the most difficult of times, and he sent you romantic songs including Perfect by Ed Sheeran, Truly Madly Deeply by Savage Garden, and Once in a Lifetime by Craig David. As I've explained in a separate video, one of the manipulations that a narcissist will use is the use of music to seduce. By sending you a message through the music that's personal to you and magical, you're made to feel particularly special. Some narcissists will claim that they've been traumatized by the way that they've been treated, so they're not able to express their feelings, but they allow another one to do so on their behalf, sending you their feelings through these songs. It's simple character trait acquisition, and actually the brilliance of the narcissism at work. The narcissist has no emotional empathy, and certain narcissists are not able to conjure up the imaginative words and descriptions to flatter somebody. So, the narcissism, showing its usual economy of effort and a certain laziness, just purloins the lyrics that are utilized by other people and then conveys them to that person saying, "This song speaks for me to you." The victim feels special. How romantic to utilize a song in that way. The individual's being triangulated with the song, but they don't realize. The consumer champion continues by writing, as you absorb the lyrics time and time again, demonstrating that it was utilized repeatedly, your emotions intensified. Completely and utterly besotted with this man, you would have done anything to get him back from Dubai and into your arms. This demonstrates the lack of rational thinking that this individual is engaging in. In one email on July the 5th, you opened up saying, "You seem to have invaded my whole existence." How typical of that as the narcissist, where we come like an invading army conquering you. "I'm thinking about you constantly." How many times have you experienced that as being a victim of a narcissist? "You're in my heart and on my mind every moment of the day, but I wouldn't have it any other way. To be honest, I never thought I'd meet anyone who could sweep me off my feet like you've done. Be in no doubt, my commitment to you will be forever." Not only is this providing reasonable fuel to the narcissist, but it's signalling very clearly that this individual is under control. And by recognizing that control, it was shortly after this that the scammer decided that she was ready to be extorted out of practically every penny that this woman had. On July the 17th, she made the first transfer, and she continued making them until September the 6th. In total, she sent 31 payments to this man in this short period. During this time, she said she received 5 generic written fraud alerts from HSBC, but she said they meant nothing to her. The consumer champion asked HSBC, and they said that the victim was shown customer warnings for every transaction she carried out. HSBC also spoke to her 9 times on the phone to discuss payments, in addition to a separate telephone conversation covering a number of payments. The consumer champion notes that while it seemed you believed what you were telling HSBC, there were instances where it said you were not always entirely transparent about the payments. At one point, for example, you referred to the scammer as your husband. Note here, the victim is lying, but has evidently been induced to tell this lie through the creation of a fantasy where she regards this person as her husband, such as her desire for him, driven undoubtedly by her emotional thinking. And when questioned directly, stated that you had met him in person and had a long-standing relationship with him. So although you still feel let down by the bank, it's fair to say it might have been able to protect you better had you been completely truthful. Not only is there, of course, a lesson in that to be learned, but it demonstrates the power of emotional thinking. that the manipulative wiles of the narcissist combined with this emotional thinking cause an individual to tell lies to their bank related to the transfer of the money. HSBC then spent weeks thoroughly reviewing your case, including hundreds of messages between you and the scammer that you supplied. After just a few days, it refunded a sum of around £3,000 into your account. This was funds it had successfully been able to recover from the fraudster, although it was only around 1% of the overall money you lost, a drop in the ocean. But then, several weeks later, HSBC informed you of its life-changing decision to provide you with a further refund of £307,000, covering your losses in full. This was, it said, under the so-called contingent reimbursement model, a set of guidelines designed to protect scam victims. Under this guidance, it was refunding you due to your vulnerability, it said. I think this was the right decision, given the unique and devastating set of circumstances that led to the scam, which arose through no fault of your own. However, some reading this may have little sympathy for you and still may struggle to understand how you can have fallen for this ruse. But I've said it before, and I'll say it again. None of us are foolproof, especially in the wrong circumstances. I'm not going to read them to you, although there are over 1,000 comments upon this particular instance, many of which are entirely scathing of the victim, and demonstrate individuals who have no comprehension of what it's like to become utterly besotted by an individual who is a narcissist. But here is another example of how a narcissist will exploit somebody by love-bombing them in order to get to that residual benefit of money, to utilize music as part and lyrics as part of that seduction, and to show how a woman, a mature lady, in the height of her vulnerability, completely took leave of her senses to transfer £310,000 to a person that she had never met, and also did so in circumstances where she began to tell lies also. Testament to the power of manipulation and emotional thinking. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.